Good morning, everybody. I want to do one of the morning things. I notice I'm not on the screen. I don't know why when I look at the videos, but you guys hear me either way. I'll try to catch myself on it when I'm talking. Today is Wednesday, July 2nd, and I'm going to talk a little bit about like some of the stuff I talked about yesterday, working with some of the guys. And I want to do in the morning just kind of like a brief. If there's any big news thing, I'll mention that. I just checked it, some of the news sites. You know, things that we put for news are not, sometimes we don't do important things. A few years ago, I remembered this morning, these things I remembered when I was just getting ready to talk. Some funny stories. But a few years ago, I flew into New Jersey. I'm going to fly in a couple of weeks. And when I flew in, right that week was when they had the first Ebola crisis on the airplanes coming back from Africa. And if you remember that story, and they had the Ebola outbreak, and then they didn't know we're going to quarantine people. But I got into New Jersey, and then that week they had the thing that it was in Dallas or something, and then the next one, they had one in a scare in Newark. I said, hey, I just flew out of Texas. I landed in Newark. You know, I was making jokes. They're going to, quarantine me. But well, it wasn't funny, but it was in a way. The thing that happened in Newark while I was up there, this was when the Ebola thing, I don't know, 2 years ago now. But some guy on a plane sneezed. I think it was a black guy. For some reason I remember. And it was major news. It was major news. And when he sneezed, he said something like, oh, damn, now you all got Ebola. Now, I'm watching the news. And I was watching the news for some other reason. I'll get to that if I remember. And of course, that was the main thing, and Wolf Blitzer and all the news things, and then they had the statement, and then they were interviewing passengers, and somebody said, "Oh, that idiot was just, kidding around." And of course, it was very serious. You can't be saying you're spreading Ebola on a plane, but I actually, the more I watched it, it was a little funny to me because he sneezed, he was goofing around, and the plane was coming in to Newark, I guess, and it was like a joke. Now, you shouldn't joke like that, I get it. But that was the news. That was the main news. But what I was watching the news for, I believe, if I'm correct, it's the same week. We just decided at that time we were going to do air raids into Syria because of a lot of stuff that's been going on for a while, and the United States put certain red lines down, and we didn't obey those red lines, and we were letting Bashar Assad get away with things. For all political reasons, we began air raids in Syria. And each night I was in New Jersey, staying at my mom's house in New Jersey. And I'm like, they know I'm the news watcher. I'm like, I can't believe there's the beginning day of the bombings, which is, it's war when you do this. Not one report. And I was starting to get mad after a few days, saying, this is so manipulative. There were reasons why they didn't want to report that. Political reasons, media bias. I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, but I see the bias. And I said, when we invaded Iraq, I said, that's all you saw, wall-to-wall coverage. But for political purposes, probably, it wasn't good to report anything at that time. So I'm waiting one night, watching ABC, NBC, one of the world news shows, and I was even flipping to Fox, CNN. And they're going to have a top story that night, in the middle of all this other stuff going on. And you know what the top story was? David Letterman was going to retire. You say, John, wait a minute, didn't he just retire? Sort of like the Judds when they're going to retire. They have like 5, 6 of them, retirement tours, the country singers. He was announcing he was going to retire like in 2 years down the road. That was the main news. That was top story at the end of the night. That's how they ended the guy on, I think it was CBS. And I thought, and finally, the one newscaster that decided to cover it, because they were holding back. They didn't want to report it. They just wanted to give a view that, oh, so what? We're going in bombing. We want to keep the public very calm, so we just won't report it. In the old days, if they did not want to report something that was very major, they had the power, the mainstream media, to not report it. Nowadays, with alternative media, blogs and all things, they can't get away with those things. And CNN, Wolf Blitzer, finally, wall-to-wall coverage, but it took a few days. Politics, and I had a friend that was I have liberal friends, and I'm not a fan of any Republican or any Democrat. It's going to make no difference at all. There's a lot of bigger issues, and that's no matter who's elected. But this very liberal Democrat, in a few minutes I'm going to read some stuff, but just could not stand Mitt Romney, because Mitt Romney had money and wealth, and now he earned his wealth, but I didn't, but just couldn't stand him. A hypocrite, and loved John Kerry, loved him. I said, oh, did you see the news about Mitt Romney? He didn't even make all that money. His wife, he married rich. I was kind of kidding and giving a little view to this person. I said, could you imagine if Mitt Romney was out buying yachts and all these things and it wasn't even money that he earned? It was his wife's money. Wouldn't you really hate him? I said, John Kerry has more money, more wealth than Mitt Romney, I believe. John Kerry married Teresa Heinz Kerry, the Heinz fortune, Heinz ketchup companies. I said, and they have pictures of him with yachts and all these things. I said, that's his wife's money. But your view of Kerry is, there's no view of him that he's lavishly living off of his what, because you politically like him or like that side. I said, I'm not mocking any one of them. I said, but you have to see this liberal person. I said, your own liberal view. You hate this other person because of wealth that he earned, but the one that you support has much more wealth, much more yachts, much more of it, and it's not his, and he's out enjoying it, living off high on the hog, married into it. But you don't see any of that as wrong, or it's because we have bias. We have political bias, and this is not a critique of Kerry or Romney. It's a critique of us, the way we are. And the top story still is the Greece situation. I was reading. I'm going to read a few verses. I got Jeremiah out here, and I don't read much, but last night I read Jeremiah 23. And I want to read just a few. I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all countries where I have driven them, and I will bring them again to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase. I'll try and post this chapter. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. It's a prophecy of Christ. For the land is full of adulterers, for because of swearing the land mourneth, or ungodliness the land mourneth. The pleasant places of the wilderness are dried up, and their course is evil, and their force is not right. I have seen also in the prophets of Jerusalem an horrible thing. They commit adultery and walk in lies. They strengthen also the hands of evildoers, that nobody does what is right. They say still unto them that despise me, These are the prophets that are speaking to those who despise God through their lifestyles, to I'm going to do what I want to do, no matter what I read or believe. The Lord hath said, the prophets were saying, the Lord hath said, you will have peace. And they say unto everyone that walks after the imagination of his own heart, no evil shall come upon you. The prophets were saying, God, be saved, accept the Lord. You could apply it, but there's no lifestyle change. Living in all types of wickedness, but hearing week after week, it's okay. You accept Jesus in your heart. I'm applying it, but not really speaking the whole truth. And it says, behold, a whirlwind of the Lord is gone forth in fury, even a grievous whirlwind. It shall fall grievously upon the head of the wicked. The anger of the Lord shall not return until he have executed, till he have performed the thoughts of his heart. In the latter days you will consider it perfectly. But if they had stood in my counsel and caused my people to hear my words, then they should have turned them from their evil way, and from the evil of their doings. The prophet has a dream. Let him tell the dream, and he has my word. Let him speak my words faithfully. Is not my word like a fire, saith the Lord, and like a hammer that breaks the rock in pieces? I didn't read the other ones. It says the prophets have also dreams, false dreams, and they prophesied lies. The context of that's Jeremiah 23, and I just reading through that, read it last night. The context was, the meaning was, there was a general teaching, preaching, that everything's going to be okay, no matter what you do. Live anywhere you want, commit all types of sins you want, but everything's going to be okay because God understands all that. That was the context. And God said, this is not my word. This is not what I'm saying. I'm telling people, I'm calling them back to repentance, to seek my face, and then I will accept the people. And some of the discussions yesterday and the other day, some of the street friends I was with again, last couple of days, one of them was telling the other one, he said, but you have to stop doing these things. If you stop using math and doing this, and in the discussion, I did not bring it up, but they said, but the church or the preaching that you're hearing, it's just, even though the other preacher means well, one of the street preachers, but you guys are still going week after week using drugs, alcohol, drunk, and you've been doing it for all these years, and the guys on their own were discussing. They said, I don't know why a certain preacher doesn't tell them not to do that, and I don't want to get into particular personality, but the discussion was, it's good to go hear preaching, he was telling the friends that are using meth and all, but you have to stop doing that. Now, of course, I agreed, and I was even a little more gracious than the other friend who was preaching to the other friend. But then I read this chapter, and this was the conversation that God was saying, you can't, we're doing all these issues with Supreme Court and all, and people think, regardless of views on various things, it's never right to murder a baby in the third trimester. It's just never right. And you can officially say it's okay because we've decided it's okay. This doesn't make it right. And there are judgments that come upon societies and nations. I'm watching the whole documentary on New York City. I've watched it before, and I still on my free Roku thing. But it's getting into a couple of periods. I'm not to the Great Depression yet, but there were other depressions that took place. And I was even looking at doing a whole little video series on New York City, just the history of it, because it's so interesting, me teaching and doing something like this. But there were times where the whole financial thing, the way it could become complicated if you get into monetary policy and how countries are doing things right now. It could get confusing, but there were periods where, because of the way investments were going and monetary systems itself were being challenged, and then you have things like the Depression. We're like at a season like that now. Greece is, it's not that the whole world will collapse because of one small country defaulting. Puerto Rico might default. Puerto Rico, it's not a state, but it, I forget the term we use for Puerto Rico, but they're part of us in a way, the U.S., and they're asking for like a bailout. There are trends that are taking place right now. And us here, where we live in this day, in this age, the answer is not going to be any political figure. It's a waste of time, and I listen to talk radio. I catch news sites throughout the day. To some of the conservative shows, all their, it's just anti-Hillary or pro the other side or whatever. That's a waste of time. Don't make a difference whether it's Hillary, whether it's whoever. That's not going to change it. That's not the answer, no matter who's in. I'm supporting no side. I wrote a few little things down. I talked to a friend of mine. I'm going to tell this story. One of my friends, he's also homeless, but he's not a drug addict problems, other problems, but so he doesn't have a whole lot of stories that are like bad stories. But he told me one yesterday. I said, I'm going to tell it, but it'll be anonymous. It's not a big thing. But he grew up here many years ago. It's interesting. He used to be in Chicago and used to work for political people. He knew Jeffrey Skilling from Enron fame. This one friend of mine, older man, knew him, knew Skilling. I got the other friend on the other side of town, Pops, the older man. He also knew Skilling. And I've introduced them because Pops used to be invested in Enron. And Pops knew people back in the day, Dallas area, some of the Oswalds. And one of my other friends, I've talked about over the years, had some connections as well. It's interesting how, Texas is big, so you don't just run into everybody that knew these people. But a lot of my friends actually knew the same people that you've seen in the news on situation. So my friend told me he grew up in a Pentecostal family, and they were very big, and it was over, I'll mention the city, was Falfurrias, which I worked in Kingsville for 25 years. So it's a little town that I'm familiar with. See if this is on me. But he mentioned how his family, they'd invite the preachers over in the church when he was a young boy. And he resented it because they'd eat all the food in the house. His father, I think, was retired military. So this was his confession to me yesterday. So he used to, young kid, but he used to bake a cake because the church people were coming over, and he confessed to me that the cake, one time he put detergent in the cake, dish soap or something, because he was mad because these people, but some of these resentments he had actually, though I kid him, these were deep-seated resentments for certain abuses he saw in a lot of the preachers preaching into the money teachings. He was familiar with that, grew up in, his mom used to take him to these revivals, and they were always asking for money, and some of them were scam artists with the healing things. These things are real, some of the miracles and prophecies. I might share a few with you, but some have faked those things as well, or presented them in ways that were not accurate. So he had this background, so he made the cake with the soap in it, he's telling me. And they ate it and they got sick. And his mom got on him, and he does. My friend is kind of a little like me sometimes. He'll tell people off, I notice. And he told the mom, how dare you do this? They're always eating all the food in the house. And he told me, but they never did it again. They always asked before they ate. So I told him I'm going to tell that story about the cake. That's your, past, criminal past. What else did I write? I wanted to mention. And one of my friends, who I just started seeing again this last couple of days. Known him for many years. And I was surprised a while ago when I seen him the last few weeks. He had found another girlfriend. He hasn't had a girlfriend in many years, but he got a girlfriend. And when I re-hooked up with him, seen him again, she had left him. And I was surprised. I said, "Man, you haven't had a girlfriend in years," because he's struggled. He's been on the streets, and it affected him. So I spent about 2 hours there, at least, just listening to him. He was very upset. He was drunk, but it was tough on him, and it was relationships. And he's 46, I think. I said, I've learned these last few years, a lot of my friends, when I ask them, why did you relapse, or why did this happen? Oh, my girlfriend left me, my wife left me. I said, I noticed it's a common thing. Relationships were a big issue. And so I didn't demean him. I said, no, I understand what you're coming from. I said, a lot of this plays a big role. So today I'm going to post that chapter. When I talk politics or I talk issues of Supreme Court, I want you to see that it's not, I don't see one side is right, one side is wrong, but I see how we can become manipulated to not see things that are wrong. This is not anti-Obama, but when Obama was the senator in Illinois, state senator, they were going to pass a law. It's very hard in the debate in this country with abortion. But all they wanted was to pass a law, a live birth, which simply meant there were cases where in some abortion clinics where they're performing the abortions and the babies come out alive. And there are some where they kill those babies. Many stories, testimonies that were found to be true. The baby comes out, maybe looks just like a baby. Don't let anybody fool you. These late-term abortions, these are babies. These are infants that you even see if you went into a hospital and looked in the nursery. That's what you're looking at. And some of them came out alive, and there were many stories. These came over the years. The doctors would, in some cases, put them in a little dishpan, told the nurse, put that aside, and they left the room and they'd wait. And if the baby didn't die in time, some did procedures, live birth abortions. Wicked, wicked. And I have liberal friends that defend that. They don't know they defend it, but they do. Because any laws that would try to restrict that, stop that, they're against those laws. But they view it as, their view is that for justice and freedom, and see how you can, if you were not aware of that, see even how you were manipulated. One of the most horrendous things a society could ever do to violate the rights of someone that's defenseless and has no voice. And some have given their okay to that, because when this vote came up in Illinois, it was vetoed. The only one that was either against it or didn't vote for it or abstained was Senator Obama at the time. Now the reason he didn't was they said, because once you start putting any restrictions, but this was live birth, they wanted to say, let's at least make it illegal. If a baby's born alive, you don't kill it. And because political reasons, he didn't even want to vote to make that illegal, because once you go down the road, you might put more restrictions. See, that's the inability to see things that matter, regardless of all politics. That's how we become manipulated on both sides, because we can't see. We can't just see truth. I want to encourage you today. That's just it. I'm going to post that chapter. I had never planned on discussing some of the other things we talked the last few days, but I think it's important to talk about those issues. I posted some of those chapters on why the Christians historically were not pro-gay marriage and all. Look at those verses. You come to, I'm not saying those verses can only be taken one way. And in time, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the other way people view them. But you read them. It's very important to be informed. You look at them. This chapter I'm going to post today. In this chapter it says the prophets said, oh, I had a dream, I had a vision, and it says they were lies. There are some dreams, visions, prophecies that are not lies. Paul, I'm reading the New Testament, he told, I think it was Timothy, fight a good warfare, fight a good fight with the prophecies that went on over you. Paul himself said to Timothy, I believe, those prophecies, and then he said, the gift that is in you by the laying on of my hands. Okay, so this type of charismatic gifting is very legitimate. Many years ago, early in the 1980s, and we went to a very good church, but it was Fundamental Baptist Church. Still love all those people. I haven't seen them in years. But they did not believe in the gifts, and, tongues were the devil and all, and they're all good people. But I remember sometimes I was with a friend who really loved Brother Roloff a lot. My friend Richard. I haven't seen him in years. And we used to go, Brother Roloff is an old-time Baptist preacher, very famous in Corpus Christi. Homes for the children's homes and working with people. And I loved Brother Roloff. He was a good man. And back in the 1980s, for some reason, I was at the house I was renting on Avenue H at the time. Had some of my Baptist friends over. We were all new Christians. And I already shared some stories with you how, there was some things that happened in miraculous ways that always, maybe didn't fit in to the church I was going to at the time. But my friend Richard loved Brother Roloff. And I remember one day, I remember this. I said, he's going to be dead pretty soon. I remember saying that. It was Kingsville. Now, I forget the year, but I remember because of what happened. My friend Richard, early, young Christian, he said, why would you say something like that? He said. And I didn't know why I said that. I don't know why I said it. And now, I'm not sure exactly when it happened. And I used to try and be safe when I told the story and say, within that year, Brother Roloff died. But I looked back once in the paper. It was only a couple months that he died. Famous. It was in a plane crash. Brother Roloff died, and it was a very big thing because he's very famous. And I remembered that because I thought that was almost like a little prophecy that I was not even aware of at the time. But God had just spoke that. I didn't even know why I said that. So prophecy and dreams and things are very real. God can use them. But in this chapter, it said they were prophesying lies. And I do remember over the years some of these things I'm dealing with. And even today, you can find a lot of this other aspect that I'm going to mention. And people were teaching, preaching. They had a dream or they had a vision. And Jesus came and said, I'm your financier. And these were very famous people that said these things. I'm here for your finances. The angel of finances has now appeared. And these became very popular. Books were written on some of these. And in those cases, and I remember telling a friend once, trying to teach him some of the verses about not loving wealth. And some will teach that wealth is godliness and God is all about money and don't listen to them. That's in the Bible. These are scriptures. And then I was telling a friend once, I said, and this other preacher, famous, I said, he says he had a vision, Jesus came, or an angel came and said, I'm the angel of the minister of finance. I said, how could we be believing that? My other friend said, how do you know he didn't have that vision? How do I know that it's fake? Because the scripture, it violates scripture. But I just told him I was mad. I said, because God told me. And he listened. He didn't say nothing. He wanted to defend that because of personalities. The same with the politics. Romney's the demon from hell because he's rich, but Kerry's a wonderful man and he's buying yachts off his wife's money. I'm not mocking Kerry, but you can totally overlook one because you love that side. that politics is not going to be the answer. This chapter I'm talking about, God wants us to come to repentance. We cannot, individually or collectively as a society, have political views that prevent us from voting to outlaw the murder of a live birth. There are people that will not vote to pass a law, at least at that time, to say, wait, it's a baby. How about we make a law that when the baby comes out, just like a baby you'd see in a nursery or in a hospital, how about we make a law you can't kill that baby? Well, I can't vote for that law because it would be violating rights and it could go down to... If you can't simply judge that because politics, then that politics ain't the answer. That's for sure. All right, read this chapter. I'm going to post it. I think I'm going to see Pops today, and maybe I'll do another little video. So the big news story today is still the Greece situation. Puerto Rico is also looking to get a bailout. In Egypt, yesterday, ISIS is hitting Egypt. ISIS is hitting Egypt, and they killed a prosecutor. I don't know if it was ISIS, a Muslim Brotherhood group might have killed the prosecutor. But the prosecutor they gave Morsi, the former democratically elected president of Egypt. He was ousted with our backing. They gave him the death penalty, that man. They killed that prosecutor. Egypt is now, the people that are running that country are worse. They kill more civilians. They imprison journalists. They're much worse than they were under Hosni Mubarak, who we backed his ouster. They're much worse, much more corrupt, going after journalists and everything. Much more corrupt, and we're backing them and we're giving them a ton of military aid because we say we need Egypt. But yet we back the ouster of the other guy, but now we need them. We have alliances that are ungodly alliances that we make in this country. So that's also some news. There's some rattling there. All right, read that chapter I'm going to post, and I'll try and do these like maybe every morning. But also, if I don't, I think I will have a good 4th of July and all, and want to bless all my friends. I might be getting with one of my vet friends today. And I want to make a note. I'm going to do a little bit on some of these issues. And I'm going to mention some of the, hopefully, a little bit, some of my vet friends, hopefully will share some stuff too. All right? God bless you guys.